My first impression of Technicolor was actually the first movie I remember seeing by title. I mean, my mother taking me to see Duel in the Sun, and I'll never forget the opening of the film, the bright yellow and the titles coming up in red, and that extraordinary music of Tiomkin and the gunshots. And it's what you might call, an extreme Technicolor experience. Blood red sunsets, Jennifer Jones' bright red lipstick, bright yellow blouse, deep, deep blues and blacks. And it was such an experience and marked me for life, actually, in terms of that color. It was almost, you could taste it in a way. I mean, when I saw other color processes, like Cinecolor or True Color, over those years, between 46 and 54, 55, I realized I knew just how unique Technicolor was. Thinking about the greatest Technicolor film of all time, I would have to go with The Red Shoes. I think it's certainly one of the greatest, if not the best, ever made with the use of Technicolor. And certainly one of the greatest films I think ever made. And Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, also by Powell and Pressburger. The use of Technicolor and the dropping away of the color into black and white for A Matter of Life and Death, Tales of Hoffman. A number of these films, have been shot by some of the greatest cameramen who ever worked in films. George Berinal, Chris Chalice, Jeffrey Unsworth. Freddie Francis was an operator. And of course, the ultimate use of that color really and lighting was Jack Cardiff, who shot Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. One of the key films in Technicolor that left a big impression on me was two. Moulin Rouge, John Huston, Oswald Morris shot it, and they worked very beautiful. They worked very closely with that Technicolor in that film. And of course, Moby Dick, which he made, I think, in 1956. And I had seen its first run in its desaturation, which is something that I became obsessed with and tried to actually make Taxi Driver that way, and only was able to do the last 10 minutes of the film in a kind of desaturated way. And it's something that I still find that was beautifully realized. When I started using color film, which really was Mean Streets, of course, 1973, I had always, in my mind, color was only one thing, Technicolor. And it really hasn't existed since 1954. They dropped the old three-strip process, which of course was very beautiful, but extremely unwieldy and cumbersome and difficult to manage. And I think the last picture processed in real dye transfer Technicolor in the United States was The Godfather Part 2 in 1974. The machines were sent to China. They stopped in Europe in the 80s, and then China stopped in the 90s. After that, it became kind of a specialty. Into the 90s, late 90s, there were a few dye transfer prints, which now, of course, that's all gone. And in the 90s, everybody started correcting color digitally. In other words, we're scanning the film, and then we're working on the coloring and going back to film. Now, of course, the end product is digital as well, which is another medium, really. When I made The Aviator, which I think was 2004 or something, what I wanted was to recreate the old color processes as they evolved throughout the time span of the action of the film. So in other words, if it was the 1930s, late 20s and early 30s, it had to be two-strip Technicolor. So everything was skewed red and green in a way, and even costumes and colors of the sets were designed and that they'd photograph a certain way. Then in the late 30s, we went into an early three-strip look, because that's post Becky Sharp. And then by the late 40s, there was a greater range of colors, and I was really, really happy with the results that we had. Digital, traditional analog. I approach them differently because, they are different, very different, and they give you a much greater range of choices, which at times is really good and at times is a little confusing. But this is the nature of the medium at this point. And the process in digital is much more streamlined. On the other hand, we're getting further away, obviously, from celluloid, from the film itself. The standard is, for digital is, preservation standard is the thing that worries me most. The word of the moment, of course, is migration, which means whenever a superior standard arises in digital, we have to migrate to that, which also means that we're not much closer to having a digital preservation standard. We really don't know how long any digital format's going to last. the only tried and true medium of preservation is really the celluloid, is the film. I would like to wish a happy anniversary to the Technicolor Corporation. It was founded 100 years ago by Herbert T. Kalmus, Daniel F. Comstock, and W. Burton Westcott. Happy birthday.